Hello, everyone. This is LeiLani Cauthen, the CEO and publisher at the Learning Counsel News Media and Research Organization. Glad to have you with us today. We have a great conversation for the next hour. It's Get Out of Your Seat, Simultaneous Teaching. And we have with us, if they can turn their cameras on now, Kale Charles, who's Assistant Superintendent, Assessment, Curriculum, and Instruction from St. Vrain Valley Schools in Colorado, one of our Edu Jedi Knight level status districts, a very rare honor, and just tells you that they're doing a lot of cool stuff. And then Geoff Sanderson, who's the Chief Accountability Officer from McKinney Independent School District down in Texas, and another Texan, Dr. Jocelyn McDonald, who's the Education Technology Specialist from Houston Independent. Good to have all three of them with us. And also our sponsor is here, Michelle Baeza, who's Director of Business Development, Yamaha, and Phil Marechal, VP Engineering, Product, and Business Development, also from Yamaha. So they're going to do a little sharing right after I sort of tee off on what we're talking about today. So really, a lot of schools have been saying that they have all their teachers or most of their teachers doing simultaneous teaching, which means, you're on camera and you're sort of stationary most of the time. Because if you move off camera, you're disadvantaging the students at home. And also, maybe they can't even hear you when you're walking around the room. So those are the issues. So there's been these change conditions of this simultaneous teaching thing going on. And we want to talk about that and how we could really enhance the experience for students. And what are the effects now on learning? How much screen time are kids getting versus human time that they're getting? Because there's certain behaviors that go on when you feel like you're on camera and you got to be like sort of doing a little show, and it changes teacher behavior, it changes student behavior. And there's a lot of tips and tricks to this whole scene. So we're going to be talking about those today. So Michelle.
As it says there, learning starts with teaching. And teachers and students need to be heard and seen clearly in order for this to occur, right? And Yamaha has spent many, many years developing products that allow for natural communication on both ends of the conversation. We now have different needs to facilitate learning, and the classroom of the future is here today, right? Teachers need high quality, automated, and easy to use tools that don't impede the natural teaching process. Yamaha's portfolio is fully agnostic and provides products that do just that. So with your permission, Lonnie, I'd like to share an overview of a few of our products in the portfolio that allow teachers to teach comfortably without having to worry about whether or not they're being heard clearly, give them freedom to move around in the class. Subject of our conversation today. Starting with our YBC 200 speakerphone. This is ideal for a remote learning environment. It's a personal speakerphone. It is battery operated. You can plug it into your computer as well. It's Bluetooth, USB. And then for our teachers, we have the YBC 330 speakerphone. So this has 3 mics on it, so it gives you a little bit more of an extended range to walk around. It also has our patented sound cap technology, which when you turn that on, it puts like an invisible bubble around you so that everybody on the far end doesn't hear any of that background noise. And we find that that's really a benefit when we're all working from home. But as we're going back into the classrooms, it can be used there as well. You bring it in. You can even daisy chain 2 of them together for a larger space or a larger classroom. One thing that we're seeing a lot of in these new hybrid environments is this ESD 1080 soundbar and the HD microphone kit. It's really designed for a classroom environment. So it offers the ideal lecture capture. So the teacher puts the microphone on their lapel and they can freely walk around the class and be heard through the speakers, and everyone on both ends has no problem listening and being able to ask questions, and makes it a lot more interactive. And this one here, the CS700, this product has a camera and microphone and integrated into one convenient soundbar. So it's got 4 mics, 4 speakers, 120-degree field of vision camera. It can be plugged into the network. It can be placed anywhere. You can mount it on the wall, as you can see here, mount it to the ceiling on a cart. It's very, very versatile. We're seeing this in a lot of applications now because it is so flexible and versatile, and it's very affordable, allowing for communication freely. Walk around your class, do everything that you need to do. And sometimes you can even forget that it's there. So you don't have that, like you were saying, when you're on camera. But we're finding this quite a bit in a lot of solutions out there.
Yeah, and what I understand too is it doesn't take like a year of being trained to turn it on and push the right buttons and
Right.
like a 4-year-old can figure it out.
Should have mentioned with all of these, they're all simply plug it in and it works, right? You hit the button and you start your meeting just like we did to join the Zoom meeting.
Yeah, because Lord knows teachers don't need even more PD right now.
Right? Yeah. It's all USB, plugs into the device, and you're ready to go. We use this quite a bit. And then, I don't know, we have our YBC 1000. I didn't know if Bill wanted to chime in and talk about some of our products as well, because he really is our expert.
So the history of Yamaha is a company that does many things with audio, including musical instruments, live entertainment mixer boards for Hollywood professionals, a professional audio division that designs audio environments for restaurants and bars. And so there's about 5 divisions that all contribute to the development of this technology that you're seeing. It does everything from balance the audio in the room, depending on whether the room has a lot of echo or is very quiet. It also has the ability to extend up to flexible environment for 5 mics and 40 people, because you can place the mics anywhere you want. So you could use it in a training lab scenario. You could use it in a classic traditional classroom setup. And by easily placing the mics, you can have different setups very quickly. It was designed also to work in very tough acoustic environments. Typically, classrooms have hard surfaces, lots of windows, ceilings, and products like this were designed specifically for being able to give you crystal clear audio. Because at Yamaha, we're really focused on improving audio echo cancellation, which continues to be a challenge, and using new AI technologies and the latest in Yamaha research. I know some of the engineers in Yamaha personally, and they went to the MIT of Japan. So this is a great product for doing flexible layouts and integrates into overhead speakers or additional handheld microphones very easily. So this is our latest technology that we're introducing. It allows for touchless audio environments for any kind of classroom. And basically, this product is a ceiling microphone solution. It has dynamic beamformer microphones. And what that really means is that there's a lot of microphones in the ceiling. They constantly analyze the environment, and they are so precise in their audio locating technology, they can locate individual students as they're talking and be able to send that audio, and only that audio, to the far end. And then it mixes other audio beams as they come in and get processed to the system. And you can do it whether you're standing or you're sitting, and you can do it in any corner of a room. You could have it literally capture audio from a teacher at a whiteboard, or capture an audio from a student in the last row of the last desk at the end of the classroom. We're very excited about this product. We've been already winning large deployments at major universities as they're outfitting hundreds of rooms with this. And we will tell you flat out, we tested it against all the competitors, and we can actually do demos where we show that Yamaha's latest technology exceeds anything else in the marketplace.
Perfect. Yeah, I have a lot to say about that, but again, I'm going to get to my panelists first. So, and I'm going to come back to these statistics later. So let's start with you, Kale Charles, who's from St. Vrain, everyone. They've been doing a lot of work to bring order to their district. So Kale, why don't you start with that? I know you have some things you want to share, and then let's talk about what you're doing with simultaneous teaching and this whole issue of hearing and seeing well for all the kids.
Well, I think, first of all, that's an amazing display of technology and state of the art. That's really, that's very interesting. I'd like to switch it up just a little bit, and we'll approach everything from the instructional realm as we go through this, from what we're doing. And, some of the things about getting teachers out of their seat and getting students engaged, because that's really what it's about, is getting our students engaged. And one of the things we talk about a lot with synchronous, asynchronous, remote distance learning is to be present. And there's many ways to be present, and using discussion boards, announcements, check in often, lots of formative assessments. And really it's about fostering relationships we, as many districts across the United States, started our second online school because of COVID. And one of the things I knew that was going to be very important for students that weren't prepared for an online environment is to have foster relationships. So our teachers did many things, having lunch with the teacher virtually, pet day, you know, how elementary schools have crazy hair day. Those things can still go on. And it really made a difference for our student engagement. And that's really, to me, what getting the teacher out of the seat means. You got to have good technology. And I really appreciate that quick overview of what the district's doing. You know, and provide multiple opportunities for student learning, for student engagement. It includes peers, online discussion boards, short videos, I think are very important. Group projects that they can do. Those are all some things that we really looked at. And I'm just giving you a brief overview from the high balcony level of some of the things. And it's really about getting that supportive online community. And that's one of the things we really worked with our teaching staff when we were in remote and distance learning to do. And I really appreciate, again, the technology side of this. It really makes a difference.
Well, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to move across the screen here of who I have in here. Dr. McDonald, not to save you for last, but I'm saving you for last. Okay, so Geoff, give us your overview. What's happening?
Well, for us, I think like pretty much all the others across the U.S. when COVID hit for us, we were not prepared, to say the least, and we thought we were, I would say, pretty progressive in comparison to our peers. But at the time for us, and I guess last March, we went off for spring break and did not return for the fourth quarter, and so we quickly had to come up with a plan that was really being developed overnight. Part of that was deploying the devices that we had to ensure connectivity for our students, and our district actually it was in good shape from the standpoint of internet connection. The overwhelming majority of our families have some form of connection, and so we were trying to make sure they had proper devices, and went through that, and a lot of that was just trying to scrub anything and everything that we had, loaner devices, broken devices that we're having to fix up, trying to make sure. And at that time, it was any family that needed a device, please let us know, and we would issue a device. So through that, and we already had a one-to-one at our high school. We'd had that going for about 5 years. We're a Mac shop, been partnering with Apple for over a decade. But then in light of all this, we realized that we needed to quickly accelerate. And so last summer, really at the end of May, we invested about $9.5 million with Apple and scaled one-to-one in about a month over the summer to PK through 12. Ended up setting up shop literally at our stadium and did a drive-by for families. Got a QR codes and scanning devices ready to go so that we could validate the credentials of a student. That we issued the device, that we'd already asset tagged, gave the student the device, and off they went. And so we were preparing for this school year. Had about a 3-week reprieve. I see another Texas colleague on this call. Our state education agency gave us kind of a soft launch to begin this school year before we had to return to in-person. And so we had a transition period to try to get everything in order, in which we were fully asynchronous at that time. We actually went ahead and moved to a synchronous learning model in the beginning, try to get our teachers ready for that as students started to return. And then we launched. We gave options. We had in-person as well as remote learning as options for our families. So we started the year with about 2/3 of our students in person and about 1/3 of them learning remotely. And then we gave parents the option at each 9 weeks, which was our natural transition for marking periods, to declare if they wanted to change. So after the first 9 weeks, we actually increased our in-person learning to about 3/4 of our kids coming back to us. Went that way. Then after we got past the winter holiday and started our second semester, we were about 80% in person and stayed pretty steady there throughout the rest of our second semester this school year. I think a lesson learned for us, probably one of the hardest things that occurred was two things really. I think was at the elementary level for our remote learners,
because of class sizes and number of students that chose remote learning wasn't consistent across all of our sites. We had to consolidate. And so we had a teacher of record that potentially was instructing students across 4 or 5 different elementary schools, which worked fine in the remote setting. But as those students started to come back, it was kind of, they're having to learn and make relationships all over again because they were going to their school of record, which may or may not have been where their remote learning teacher was.
Wow.
I think the second part for us that we really, and we didn't have a great solution because we were just in it, was at the secondary level, we were running exclusively either if you were in person or if you were learning from home, you were learning synchronously. And so it was literally where we would have our secondary teachers would just be providing a lesson in real time to in-person students, and as well as having the Zoom session open for the remote learners. And some of the feedback we got there was it was difficult. Some of the feedback we got from families was the remote learners didn't feel as engaged or connected to the learning process, especially in the early days. It was difficult to, sometimes you forget that you have students that are learning remotely because you don't see their faces. And so trying to make sure that you provided that opportunity for the connection with the students that were learning from home. And the reality was, it was just, a task that our teachers had never undertaken. And we really didn't know how much that workload really turned out to be. So it was tough.
Yeah, we're hearing that in a lot of places. There's some of the Atlanta districts, Geoff, are in a similar situation to you where they came back, but some of them are missing 35% of kids, so simultaneous teaching, they're basically telling all of their teachers, stay in your seat. You can't go off camera, or there's an equity issue for the home
That's
kids.
right.
Yeah, so it's been really hard. Okay, so Jocelyn, you look awesome on camera. It's like, wow. So let's talk about what you guys have done, because I think you also are doing simultaneous teaching. Is that right?
Yeah, so our stories are similar to what Kale and Geoff have already kind of expressed. When we hit spring break, we didn't return. And so, our team, of course, were full throttle and supporting the district. Our high schools, we have about 46 high schools, were already one-to-one. So that kind of helped support that initiative with a program we already had in place. And so, of course, our elementary campuses had the harder hit with having to now kind of quickly convert and shift to leveraging more technology. And I think our biggest thing that our team did was finding different supports, because that, of course, brings more challenges when you haven't really had that prior experience to leveraging technology in that way. And so we started with the synchronous model, and we kind of moved to coming back in person around October of last year. And so it was before the turn of the year. We started seeing more students come back in. Of course, at the high school level, I think, or secondary level, we had more kids that were virtual than in the elementary level, but they were still, depending on the campus and their statistics of how their campus was set up, how many kids were in and out. But the challenge definitely was that when we came back was the simultaneous, or what we refer to as a concurrent teaching model, was definitely a challenge for teachers. And I think the challenge came twofold. One, leveraging the technology just in general, it's just in person, and having to learn or 2 different modalities of using technology at the same time. It wasn't like a lot of our teachers had a lot of practice with that prior to COVID. And so that was the extra layer that came with it. And so trying to build supports around it and how to kind of maximize their instructional time. And that came with lesson design and learning how to leverage the LMS to kind of maximize and design their lessons in an online environment to kind of maximize their time with their students in class. But of course, the equity thing is an issue, because the teacher is struggling with balancing their time on how much time they're spending with the camera. Then you have some that were in person, and they're still trying to learn how to adapt between the 2 different modes. And that has been definitely challenging. And so you do find a lot of teachers still at their seats. Of course, with COVID and the restrictions that were in place, that also kind of added to that. But there were, and we have teachers who started to kind of find different ways in leveraging like the breakout rooms and creating heterogeneous grouping with their students who were home and in in the classroom so that they can then move around the classroom a lot more. And so that way it's a little more flexible and finding ways to engage them together. Because sometimes it was hard, especially with the students' cameras off. You don't know if they're really on the other end passively engaged in the lesson. And so it's kind of hard to determine that. I think the other shock or transition for some teachers were going from that whole group teaching approach where, you're the sage on the stage to becoming to the facilitative learner or teacher for your students. And that was a transition and still is. And so we're still supporting around that. The second semester, many schools started kind of shifting from where they could or have the capacity to, shifting from that concurrent model to a split staffing into some areas, so that kind of alleviates some of the extra stress to where the teacher may still have in-person class, but maybe at a different time have a remote class, or sometimes they'll switch back, or either I'm all virtual or I'm all teaching in. For those campuses that have implemented that, we've seen definitely somewhat of a relief of the stress from the concurrent model, and because they were able to kind of focus a little more on how they're leveraging the technology. And so we're still bringing supports. We put in a lot of supports in place. So we have bookings where teachers can book us at their own time from 8 to 5 with any one of our team members for anything. So we have our calendar booked and synced to campuses. We are all shifting to different areas where we go and work with the area directors and the principals to work on initiatives to help support them and maximizing the use of technology. And so it's definitely been a shift, but I definitely am excited to see some of the results and the digital skills that have been gained this year going into the next school year.
Yeah, a lot of good tips and tricks you just talked about there. I want to highlight a couple of them, like the breakout room, the small group thing in Zoom and the other platforms. That's highly useful. And I've heard some districts now say that what they're having teachers do is every time they're doing simultaneous or concurrent or synchronous, right, all the same thing, they deputize someone who is the overseer of the physical room to make sure that if anyone raises their hand, the teachers are aware, or if there's something going on. And then same thing for the virtual. Someone is like the deputy. So otherwise you can miss things because your attention, we're one-way attention people. We really think we can multitask, but we can't. And then the designing of lessons, I would like all of you guys to talk about that. And then the last thing I'll mention is that we've had some districts say that togetherness doesn't mean lecture, that sometimes the best way to do this is exactly like you would in a physical classroom. But that's where you kind of need this audio and, enhancement, because kids at home, even if everybody's heads down on a worksheet, if they can hear questions going on, even though there isn't sort of a live lecture, they're just together online. They're not necessarily paying attention unless something happens. That's been missing in a lot of simultaneous teaching, because people think they have to be lecturing or running it the whole time, rather than let's just have it on as sort of background of togetherness. So, Kale, I'm coming back around to you on the design of the lessons and then the enhancements to ensure, because, like Yamaha just told us everything that they're doing, which is fantastic. What are you thinking with in terms of how the change should be guided, maybe with your teachers? Like, should they get some advices?
So one of the things we've been doing, and by the way, we've been doing remote learning. We started 25 years ago with this type of learning with coaxial cable, believe it or not. So we've been doing this for a while. And another thing that we've been doing for about 10 years is blended learning. And so we felt pretty well prepared to go in here, not only from a technology base, but definitely from an instructional base. One of the things when we went to remote learning, where it was our kids at home, is that we knew that routine and structure was important. So I'm going to bring up an old theorist, an old instructional model here, Madeline Hunter. So we took the Madeline Hunter lesson model and adapted it to an online forum a lot with what Dr. McDonald was talking about, putting in those elements, because kids need structure, they need repetition, they need consistency, especially early on when we were in this. So we adapted the Madeline Hunter instructional lesson plan design for our online environment, and it worked well. Our teachers appreciated it. Of course, we had all the PD and everything that was associated with that. And that was what we did, LeiLani, from that lesson plan level, really to help out. Having a guaranteed and viable curriculum across our district, that is huge too. I know I talked to some of the districts that were more site-based with this, and they struggled with it. You know, one thing our district's been is very systems perspective across our district. We have about 35,000 students. And so that was a great help to us as well.
Yeah, good tips. And I know that's been one of the huge differentiators for you, is having an actual standardized, viable curriculum. Huge. Because a lot of schools, when this happened, they were trying to do everything for free. They got the devices, right? That was the big heavy lift. Like Geoff, you were just talking about, like, it sounded like a military operation, but then every teacher was on their own. They're like, hey, you know, you're going to find everything for free on the internet. Good luck with your bad self. And that was hard. People were crying in the principal's offices. That was very hard. So Geoff, your answer to the same thing.
Yeah. There was a lot of crying, for sure. I'm actually, my wife is a first grade teacher, so I got to see firsthand when she was having to teach remotely from our house, how that evolved into, and then transitioned into the classroom setting and going and check into her. And since I office right across from our CIO, and so I got some frequent calls, especially in the early days of us starting school again, because you're exactly right. We got everything in their hands, we thought, but it was very difficult to ensure that everything was operational and was running as it should. For us, we did the standard type tricks, and I'm sure everyone did. We tried to bring our teachers, and part of that was the balance too, right? Because you finished the last school year in the most wacky way that we've ever experienced in doing school, at least for, I would assume, all of our generations. And then you segue in and you're trying to honor and respect and lift up. At the same time, you're trying to recruit to design lessons in preparation for the upcoming school year. And so I think one of the kind of that lurking anxiety, frustration that our teachers faced, my wife included, was our curriculum folks were running as fast as they could to support, but we didn't have the A to Z catalog ready for them at the beginning of the school year. And so as they were trying to look ahead, the teachers trying to look ahead, it wasn't necessarily day by day, but potentially our year at a glance became a week at a glance. And so for them trying to understand, this is what we're trying to accomplish. And then I think one of the really challenging points was that, all kids don't learn at the same pace, right? And so then trying to understand how you're going to remediate and come back to those students and still provide extended learning opportunities for those kids that are soaring and then that's working well for. What our state did, I'm not sure if it was a national trend, but Jocelyn, they probably took advantage of it as well at Houston. But in the second semester, some of our commissioner would host mostly almost weekly calls as a kind of a webinar focus. It was not a dialogue, but it was for our state education agency to get updates on pandemic relief and changes that were occurring and so forth. And I guess born from that was a group of thinkers that petitioned the state to consider some additional flex days for school districts to implement during the learning process, which was a departure from what we already had in place. And so during our second semester, we were able to introduce these asynchronous learning days, which amounted to allowing us to give students assignments, but tell them they needed to work on them at home. Still brought our teachers together and allowed them some additional learning time together or independent time. And again, that really was almost a catch-up model, catching up type model, because it was trying to just plug in a pause button to allow teachers to break. And so in our case, we reintroduced that basically one day each month in the second semester, where teachers had kind of an additional day to lesson plan or to kind of team strategize or just really support each other, because they were trying to get through this as best we can. I'll say as an anecdote for us, one of the things I'll be watching, because I'm deep in data in our district and primarily drive that function. I monitor the performance of our students through grades and so forth, and we did see a pretty significant uptick in fail rates at the very beginning, and then it seemed to smooth out and normalize as kids became more accustomed. But one of the things we did observe throughout the year was our attendance rates dropped significantly, both for in-person students and remote. And so trying to negotiate that, I mean, we had students, I'll end with this, that became clever, because we wanted to make sure that even if a student was sick, we're thinking there's no sick days, because now we have the synchronous option and or asynchronous option and for students to still access school. But what we found, at least at some of our high schools, was even for our in-person students, they were kind of part-time in-person. So they were getting choosy because they were still able to access Zoom sessions for some of their classes. And so our teachers started noticing, that looks familiar because the kid was out in the hallway. They just chose not to come to in-person learning and sign on and use the Zoom session. So we're trying to negotiate, all new boundaries with how we utilize technology and how it gets leveraged, and wanted to be flexible, but at the same time still provide structure.
Yeah, so a lot of lessons learned along the way. I want to come back to something you mentioned, Geoff, but I want to have Jocelyn go first, and that is, let's take the next question in and involve also Phil and Michelle into the model difference because of the attrition and the change in expectations. So Jocelyn, go ahead.
So with if we're still on lesson design, on the lesson design part, we luckily had a curriculum team that had that in place, but like Kale was kind of mentioning earlier, trying to stay abreast of that with all the changes from the high school level where it was implemented, and the elementary, it was more new, but it was definitely a help to support teachers in learning how to leverage the learning management system. As far as how they were maximizing and kind of going back to the video component, one of the things I know I definitely do when I'm supporting the district in training is teaching teachers how to leverage audio and video to maximize their instructional time, to kind of allude to being present, even when their students are online or in person, and you can kind of leverage those opportunities for kids who may not have been passively engaged, or maybe sometimes you think you're doing a great job teaching and maybe that student didn't receive it. They can always go back and replay or go back to it. And so we had a system, a part of the learning management system, that they can design their lessons a certain way to where students can move ahead, or you can control how they are going to the next mode. So they have those options available to the platform. And so if you want to do more of a personalized learning structure, they have the opportunity to say, okay, well, you have to complete A before you go to B. Or you could just have it open to where they can go to and kind of gauge as you're kind of walking them through or going through the lesson with the students. And so those components of the learning management system definitely help amplify how teachers were learning how to design and kind of maximize their use. But something that was new for them was them recording themselves and getting comfortable with recording themselves and embedding those into assignments. Because one thing for sure, for students who are virtual, they need to feel inclusive into the learning environment. And when you are at home and sometimes they have the students in front of them, it's like the teacher is talking to the students, the camera is on the teacher, but the student who is at home doesn't feel like they're a part of the lesson because the teacher is talking to the class and not necessarily the students on camera. So being kind of cognizant of that you have students online in that moment, but kind of leveraging video or pre-recorded video to kind of help support that. That way you can kind of navigate between those units. And so that has been definitely a transition for a lot of teachers to kind of maximize the LMS for that process.
Yeah, so you guys have had a bit of a model shift. Like you've gone more to what Learning Counsel calls a hybrid logistics model, where you have students can pace a bit, sort of maybe still within grade parameters forward, which is new. That's awesome. It does it does create some issues, right, for teachers. But let's go to that model shift right now. So I want Michelle or Phil to sort of kick off this next sort of round of discussion about what's going to happen next, because there's so many schools reporting that they're maybe back to normal, but it's not normal anymore. AB days, AB weeks, like Geoff, you were saying, some days that are off and it's all virtual learning. And then also 20 to 35%, maybe higher in some places. Parents don't want their students back in school at all. They worked better at home, or else they're still afraid, right? So that's creating a lot of model shifts. So Michelle, talk to me a little bit about, the Yamaha perspective on that whole model shift. What are you seeing?
Well, for instance, when I was sharing in the portfolio for the ones that stay at home, we want to make sure that they can feel included and still be heard. And so having the smaller products that are available for them, but I'm not sure as far as how the budget goes and how that's allocated to the students, if that's included as part of their devices or not. But we see that when you're wearing a headset all day or your earbuds all day, it can be quite uncomfortable. And it gives you a little bit more freedom to move around, because I know the kids have a hard time sitting still. So that's
another whole health issue too, right?
Yeah.
Because you're trapping bacteria in warmth.
And it's not good for your hearing, and you can't get up from your desk. So I mean, being able to move around, even if you're listening, bouncing on the ball. I have a ball in here for my son, so being able to move around and giving them tools when they are working from home and learning from home, I think is important. And I haven't seen that a lot in the customers that I've seen and marketing that I've seen. Everybody's focusing on headsets and stuff, but I think there's value in providing them with real strong tools if they are going to be at home. And as an example with my kids, they're doing some dual enrollment. They're homeschooled, but they also do dual enrollment with some community college classes, and they were 100% asynchronous in those lessons, and they felt very, I guess, not unincluded, but they did not feel that they were getting a good education, because they're like, I'm just watching this PowerPoint slide and this pre-recorded video, and I can't ask questions, but I'm afraid to ask questions during the 1 hour, office session that's available. Mm-hmm. So I like what Dr. McDonald was talking about, how you're doing the blended of the asynchronous and the synchronous together, but having it live, but then doing some of the pre-recorded videos so that you still feel included. I think that was a really excellent way that you guys were presenting that.
Yeah, because I think what we're talking about in a model shift, and I'm going to go to you, Kale, and then Geoff and Jocelyn, and I'll come back to you, Phil. I think what we're talking about in a model shift is really the fact that we might be back in school in many places of the country, but it has to also be virtualized. It has to feel like, for the remote students or a kid that needs to be home because they're sick that day, but they could still attend online, it has to still feel like you're sort of there, but we haven't really leveled up, the entire environment to do that. We've maybe got some furniture, but maybe not the audio and visual enhancements, so that you can hear the other kid in the back of the room ask a question, right? Even though if you're just like doing your essay at the time, you're still part of it all. So let's talk about that model shift, because Kale, you guys have been mutating for, like you said, 25 years, but you probably saw even more mutation. What is your expectation for model going forward?
So we see what we've learned in this, and we experienced some of this, is that, for example, we created an online robotics class, and we were able to share it across the district. And now we want to do more of that, LeiLani. That's one of the models we want to do. We also know if we have some of the higher level high school classes, AP classes, where we have a qualified teacher in one school, let's take AP European history, but we don't have it in some of the others, and we have student interest. That's where this model will also come in to play, at least for next year on a small scale within our district for that. And part of it is like what Phil was mentioning, that, you know, that if you have that really good technology base, you can do these type of things. If you have the really good speakers in the ceilings, those type of, that makes a huge difference. And it has with us so far. So that's part of the model that we're looking at, leveraging our learning management system, looking at choice boards, discussion boards, those type of things. And really, we're about student curiosity. We really want our students to take more of the learning on themselves, and this affords it. I don't know if it was Dr. McDonald who said, you know, the sage on the stage, if I got that right. That's something we've been trying to get away from years and years. And really this kind of forced some of the last people that were holding on to that, because it was very comfortable for them to get out of their comfort zone. And because we all know that's where the magic happens. So that's what we want to do. And then probably in year 2, LeiLani, we want to go outside of Colorado, outside our district in Colorado. Some of our rural districts that don't have a lot of resources, we really have a heart for them. So we want to bring them in and see if they can't take some of these classes through our systems once we get them perfected and really get the bugs worked out. So I also hope we're going to be moving more towards choice and competency-based learning. There's some classes, as you know, in here, like computer science, I think is an easy one to do that. You know, we have some kids, why are we putting them through computer science 101 when they know more than the instructor? Bam, let's get them out of that. Let's get them into Python. Let's get them into, you know, CompTIA, all those type of things that they need to be in. I think so. And another model that we're doing is P-Tech. And that's where our students in high school have the choice of going into for example, we have a partnership with IBM. So our students will go through a community college. They'll get a high school degree. They'll get an AA degree in computer information systems. They'll get a paid internship with IBM, and then they'll be first in line for a job. They're debt free. And now we have 3 of those. We have a biomedical, we have a cybersecurity, now we have a computer information system for our students. And so those are the models that we're really promoting for next year and into the future.
Wow. Interesting. So you're suggesting that if you really nail the virtualized environment, you might be able to extend your offerings beyond yourself. That's really, I have to say that.
You know, absolutely.
That's super cool.
Why can't we offer classes after kids get out of practice?
Yeah.
You know, across the district, you know, those type of things. Let's make it better so students really have that interest. The virtual environment is perfect for that. That's another thing we're going to do next year as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I love this. I love this. This is like we're moving into the gig economy model of teaching and learning. How cool is that? Okay, so Geoff, go ahead. Model change.
Well, I hate going next after hearing all that's still going on in Colorado, our friend. But I think for us, certainly some of the traditional partnerships that we had existing, we're scaling up with our local community college. I think many of those will be more STEM related. We had some of those that were already in the pipeline of discussion, and it just, I think in response to pandemic, it forced us to move quickly. So we will have greater offerings for our students in regards to that. I think what we're still going to struggle with this summer, I mean, we're actually, we had a conversation, matter of fact, a couple of days ago, is because we can't go back to whatever it was before. I think we recognize that. I think our kids are going to revolt if we did. And so now it's trying to find that balance, because we provided the tools. We had a learning management system in place. It was at the time pre-COVID, fully scaled at our high school to support our one-to-one model. We were doing soft pilots backwards into middle and into select elementary schools based on a feeder pattern to try to maintain familiarity with kids that were learning at a young age on a single platform to continue with that same platform. COVID forced us to scale it district-wide. And so the learning absolutely and instruction will have to continue in a different manner, because our kids now have spent over a year inside of a system which I think they prefer. I think it gives them autonomy, gives them flexibility in being able to respond to lessons. It's forced our teachers to differentiate in a way they never have before, and the different tools they have available within the lesson design that was made available. And so for us, we're still, to be honest, trying to find that sweet spot about we will be, as of today, fully in person next year. So we are not going to try maintain a kind of a hybrid, separate type of model. Although we recognize in next year we don't want kids to miss a beat. And so I think the value add for us through this year, even though we're not going to fully continue with this model as it looked this year, there will be kind of continuous learning in some capacity 24/7 for our students, so that in theory, even when our students aren't physically present, they can still continue with the instruction with their peers and still have that opportunity for collaboration with their students. And so our teachers are still going to have to be able to provide those online and alternate types of learning opportunities.
Yeah, I love that. I'm going to recommend that I send you our latest special report and you take a look at the hybrid high flex model, because that's exactly what you're talking about. And it's kind of developing and it's getting the biggest response right now in our national survey. Okay, so Jocelyn.
Yeah, so kind of piggybacking off of Geoff, we're still finding balance. I know we're expecting many of our students to return in person next year, and of course, this is still under discussion whether there's going to be a virtual component or academy or not. But as far as the traditional model in the classroom, for me, I'm so excited. I was getting excited just hearing both of them speak about the things that are happening, because as an education technologist, these are the things I want to see pre-COVID happening in a classroom and making that impact. And so I know there's a lot of talk about the learning loss that has happened, but there's so many skills that have been gained that can help maximize that process going into next year. And so even understanding how to leverage the blended learning model into the classroom and how you design and space your classroom are things that we're still developing and supporting our teachers with thinking differently, because they're so used to either having just the straight rows or, maybe just the 4 groups, but kind of maximizing the use of your technology in your space. And so there's different ways you can design your classroom for it to be more engaging. You can leverage the technology, whether you're in person or concurrent. And so it's still really supporting our teachers and kind of shifting that. And so there's still, we've moved the needle so much in such a short time, but there's still more work, of course, to be in place. And so I'm just really looking forward to what's to come and what classrooms are going to look like next year. And so especially at the elementary level, because I think they had the biggest shift with not having access to so much of the technology and having to leverage it with the little ones and having to teach them how to log in, know their email address, and those little things that kind of interrupted instruction and they would get frustrated with. And so being purposefully and intentionally designing, like teaching our students how to use it, may not be as big of a deal, I think, this next go around, because some of those foundational skills have been implemented, so we can kind of focus more on the work. And so I'm definitely, for me, the positive out of this experience has been that force of push, the mindset, and getting uncomfortable. So it's like Kale alluded to earlier, for me, I always say you got to get uncomfortable to get comfortable. And so, and being okay with that uncertainty with technology definitely helps support them in feeling confident to move forward, because it's not going to always be a perfect system, and things don't always go well. But kind of having that mindset for our teachers to be able to be flexible and think innovatively on how they're using their classroom space.
Yeah, I love that you said that, because both you and Geoff alluded to the fact that there's been a gain in student agency that's sort of invisible. We now have had a year of orientation to the virtual model, and we don't want to backslide on that, because one of the gains of that, even though there might have been academic achievement loss, a huge leap forward was made in student agency to drive their own learning, to arrive and drive, right? And that needs to be elevated, right? That needs to be used to bring back the achievement. And we can't just ditch it and then you just get lazy again, and all I got to do is have my body arrive into a seat in the room now. That's all I got to do. Well, it's easy, right? No. You have to get in there. You have to dig and find the right thing to read and blah, blah, blah. And I love that you said that, Jocelyn, and you, Geoff, too. And I think Kale, you also alluded to that. So this model shift, Phil, because you've been on the international scene. So what are your thoughts on where is the future on all this model stuff?
Well, first of all, I want to say that the discussion from the panelists has been fascinating, and I've already been picking up a bunch of new tips and ideas, especially about LMS tools and single sign-on licensing, so you know that people are actually in the classes and that they're attending, and also better metrics to know that they're actually looking at the screen that you want them viewing and not shopping on Amazon.com. So with that all being said, and by the way, I just purchased camping equipment, just kidding. The interesting thing that I feel here is that it occurs to me that learning and education is a lifelong process, and that even I recently took a graduate school class at Berkeley on artificial intelligence because of a project that I'm working on, and that was done remotely and it was done over the technology, but it really becomes part of the fabric of the way that learning will occur more and more in the future, not just for students, but for professional workers, and especially for technologists like myself, who constantly have to learn new ideas and new technologies. And, you know, they say you can't teach an old dog new tricks, but when they tell me that's part of my paycheck, I learn pretty fast how to make new tricks, you know? So I think that this is kind of really a great movement forward for the United States in a global competitive economy where intellectual capital exists everywhere. You know, I was at Cisco, and Cisco would hire thousands of engineers in India for projects, and then discover the projects were failing because they weren't properly being managed to the expectation of the US executives by timelines, dates, schedules, and quality. So this is all part of a big continuum of shift for both how we have done things in the past and the way we will do things in the future. And I congratulate each one of you for taking this challenge on.
Yeah. Yeah, we do have a question from, thank you, Phil, from Gina Cranechich. I probably butchered your name, Gina. But I think I was told I'm supposed to ask your question for you, I guess. So the question is, what LMS are the three districts using? Kale?
Our LMS is Schoology. And then we also, for our grades K through 2, K through 3, we use Seesaw.
Okay, thank you. Geoff?
Like Kale, we're using for our pre-K through second grade Seesaw, and then we scaled Canvas 3 through 12. Canvas was actually supporting our high school initiative. We scaled it down. Love that solution, but I think the feedback we got from our instructional technology folks was that they felt like for the primary grades that Seesaw is a better platform for those learners.
Yeah, it has the right button affordances for little fat fingers. Yeah, that's big. That's big with me. UI, UX. This is a big deal, people. And Dr. McDonald, didn't you guys go through like a maelstrom of change right in the middle of the pandemic as well on LMS?
Well, yes, we've been using It's Learning for quite some time. And so we've definitely been leveraging that platform and using it in new ways to kind of support this process. And so some of the ways that we're just like, here's like more substitution model, here's your assignment, here you go, and more to the true integration of the technology and being more intentional with how we use it, I think is what we've gotten out of this year and kind of leveraging it. And there's still, of course, more room to grow, especially with the different designing for asynchronous and personalization, I think has really helped support that process. And when having to manage two different modalities, I think really helps push being intentional how you're designing your lessons. And so we leveraged the It's Learning platform to do those features this school year.
But you guys, I would just characterize all three of your districts a little bit more advanced than the bulk of the districts who were caught flat-footed with the pandemic and they went Google. And Google Class is not a true LMS. And I think Google is now fully integrated with It's Learning that you have, Jocelyn.
Yeah. So the Google integration and Microsoft integration does help support that. So for our teachers who are Google lovers, they're still able to use that and get that same look and feel that they would get into Google Classroom through the LMS by leveraging that integration there. And so if they still want to assign a Google slide and create digital manipulatives for their students to kind of move around, they can still do it, see what their students are doing in real time, and still be able to give instant feedback and have that feedback component too. I think from leveraging the LMS kind of also amplified a lot of instructional practices because now students can get feedback before they actually turn their work in. and they can get not just, text feedback, they can get audio feedback, you can get video feedback, and you can kind of be a little more interactive with how you're engaging with your students, whether they're in person or online. And so I definitely say the integration piece has kind of helped win some over of our Google lovers over to leveraging the platform.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, because you mentioned something that I forgot to bring up already. And since we have a couple minutes, I'm going to bring this up with everybody. From the most recent survey, data off the 2021 preliminary one, we've had over 1,000 teachers. There's two, there's an administrative study too. As of May 7th, this is what we asked them about. How many hours do you spend back and forth digital traffic on assignments, logins, which content, student to parent email, blah, blah, everything that's not just teaching, right? So huge, 10 plus hours a week is 30%, 5 to 10 hours a week, 18%. These are the teacher answers. The administrators think it's more. And then we also asked, so get out of your seat, how much passive learning is going on, which means that you're just lecturing, assigning videos, things that are non-interactive, like reading a Google Doc, okay? Teachers are saying, notice their skew is towards the higher level of percentage of time versus administrators who think there's less time on passive. They think their teachers are doing much more active leadership, causing conversation. This is why we're talking about audiovisual enhancement right now, and that kind of stuff. And then in terms of active, teachers say they're doing a lot more. In other words, they contradicted their answers before. And then administrators, their skew is a little at the higher level. So the truth is not there, is what I'm saying, as to what's really happening. And I think it's really all over the board right now nationally, because we're in a new battlefield. We just, simultaneous teaching is hard, and we haven't really started to pay attention into the perfect refinement of it, which is why I want to thank, before we all go, Yamaha for sponsoring. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Phil, for putting this conversation together, because, I think we got out a lot of tips and tricks, and we also have identified, there's more to be done, right? In terms of the refinement of the perfect experience for whether you're there in class or you're at home. If the teacher's never leaving her chair, we have a problem. And so, there's more to be done. So I really want to thank you guys. Kale, as always, my hat's off to you. I think you're awesome. And, pass that on to all of your compadres who we also think are amazing. And Geoff, thank you very much. I'd love to see you when we come down to Dallas. We're going to be physically down in Dallas this year. So we get to be in 5 cities this year. And then, I don't know if you want to come all the way up from Houston. I'm not really sure. Dr. McDonald, but I'd love to see you too. We might come to Houston next spring, so you could wait till then too. And then also Michelle and Phil, thank you guys so very much. I want to check one last time for question and answers or any chat. Do you have one thing? Yeah, so we're going to make sure you have contact information. We got a chat in here. We'll make sure they have it. But it looks like we're good to go. You're free to move about the country again. Stay safe, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Thank you, Kale, Jocelyn, Geoff, Michelle, Phil, and see you guys all here next time. The very next thing you should know is going to happen from the Learning Council, so beware, is the Summer EduJedi Camp, where you're going to learn more than you've ever learned before about the terminology of what's going on in digital curriculum and systems, and what are the new digital academic learning standards from the Learning Council EduJedi, as well as the new lesson design methodology. So thanks for being with us. See you next time.